Hello, hello, my friends. AmyR here with Prairie Paper and Ink. Welcome back to my face and my card making space and a birthday card. I needed to make a birthday card and I pulled out this bold prints, I think it's called Large Toucan. Yes, Large Toucan stamp that I had purchased. I think it came out last year and it's been sitting here and waiting. This is by Hero Arts, by the way. So yeah, I pulled it out and I did some very simple watercolor with distress spray stains, which, yes, a lot of you have noticed they're finally up on the wall where I can see them and access them easily. And I've done a few videos. I've done videos in the past, and then I've done several videos recently using distress spray stains for watercoloring because I just really enjoy it. I enjoy the look of it. You could use oxide sprays to watercolor. You can use inks. All the options are kind of endless. I'm just really enjoying using the spray stains. It's kind of one of my favorite ways to use them. But I stepped it up by adding texture using like Copic markers, and then did a bit of die cutting and added extra dimension and all of that. So I had a lot of fun. And I used some other oldie but goodie products from CZ Design and Simon Says Stamp as well. So if you keep watching, I will show you guys how I made this card. So because the background stamp is a red rubber on cling foam stamp, I removed my grip mat from my MISTI. And then I put this background stamp into the MISTI face up. You could do either or. I've shown just sticking the stamp to the lid of my MISTI and stamping it like a normal stamp, but this works too. So I stuck the stamp in there, and then that way I could arrange my cardstock where I wanted, because it's a 6x6 stamp, but my card front is A2 size, so 4 1/4 by 5 1/2. And I'm using distress watercolor paper with the smooth side facing the stamp. So I lined it up where I wanted it, and then I just put some PIXIE tape on the back of it, closed the lid, and then that way that's going to hold the paper in place. Because I had a feeling I would probably need to stamp this multiple times to make sure I get all the line art detail. And I used anti-static powder tool on the cardstock, and then I'm inking up the stamp with VersaFine Clair Nocturne ink, and I'm just going to ink it up and repeat the stamping process until I get all of the detail, because there's a lot of detail in this stamp. So I wanted to make sure I got all of it. Everything is stamped, all of the little bits and pieces, and this is where it was nice having the cardstock just taped in place. And then it was like, okay, like the eye was the biggest thing because that, it's solid. So got all that stamped. Once I was happy with it, I'm going to cover this with clear embossing powder. You don't have to heat emboss this, but I like it because it gives me a little bit of bumper pads when I am watercoloring, so I don't have to worry so much about one area bleeding into the next. And also it adds that just a little extra detail as well, because it gives it that shiny raised detail. So I coated it with that detail, clear embossing powder, tapped off the excess, and then melted this with my heat tool. And like I always do, you got to tilt it back and forth in the light just to make sure that everything is smooth and shiny. Anywhere that's kind of dull looking just means the embossing powder hasn't been melted yet. So hit those spots again with the heat tool, make sure it's all covered. And then to clean it, I just used my little Hero Arts scrubber. I've been showing this in recent lives or talking about it. And yeah, it's just got the little scrubby stamp cleaner on a wood block. And I just spray it with my stamp cleaner. I cleaned off the stamp. I wiped off the excess with just my flour sack towel. And I left that in place because I'm going to come back to it later. So set that aside, and then for my watercoloring using distress spray stains, I will have every color that I used listed with the supplies along with everything else. And I just take a bit of it and I just put little dots of it onto a palette. It's just simple. And you need a lot less than you think you do. I started out with mustard seed, and yeah, I didn't even need these few little dots. I could have gone with less, but I can't. A bottle of spray stain is going to last forever. I've had mine for years. Anywho, this is real time and then super sped up. It didn't take super long. I'm honestly not sure. I used my little Tim Holtz watercolor brush, same one that I have been using for eons. I forget how many years I've had this thing. It's just kind of my go-to, especially when using distress products. That's just like, just grab my little water brush. It just works. And then off to the side, I do have a cloth that I wipe the brush off in between colors if there's ever too much water, etc. And I just went little section by section. So I had started with that mustard seed, and then I used some black soot. And then I'm going to pull in some picked raspberry and carved pumpkin. Here's carved pumpkin for his beak. And I just had fun with it. You know, it's like kind of a tropical image. And yeah, it was just fun to delegate different little things to different colors. So yeah, there's picked raspberry. Did that for the toucan, and then for some of the little florals. And then I start going in with peacock feathers. So adding some of that. And then I've got twisted citron and a little bit more carved pumpkin for his feet. And wilted violet, of course. Had to add some wilted violet into there. And then gathered twigs for the branch. Because I was just kind of grabbing colors as I was going along. And I was like, this needs this, this needs this. Mowed lawn for a couple of leaves. Since there's a fair bit of greenery in this design, I did mowed lawn and then twisted citron just to give a couple different shades of green. And I did not paint in the background. You totally could. I decided not to. I kind of liked how everything sort of popped on the white. So I left that. You could also color this with, like, stamp this onto just regular cardstock, color this with markers, color pencils, etc. Like, it's just, I don't know. This image is very sort of art deco, and I fell in love with it when HeroArts had released it. And then, yeah, it's just been sitting here for so long. So it's like, okay, it's time to pull this out and actually make a card with it. So I painted everything just using the same colors, just adding them to the florals, etc. I forgot a couple spots, but I go back and like fill them in. And then to step it up, you could totally just add more layers of watercolor, you know, and do different things. But instead, I pulled out my Copic markers, and I'm just going to add a bunch of little dots. I've shown this in tons of videos, whether I'm coloring with, usually when I'm coloring with alcohol markers, that's another way to just add some texture and dimension, is just add some little dots. It doesn't have to be Copic markers. You could use the Spectrum Noir Tri-Blends. You could use water-based markers as well. Whatever, you know, whatever's going to work. Heck, you could even do it with colored pencils. It would just take a little longer because you'd literally have to like draw the dots, but it's all possible. So I just went in with my Copic markers and just varied the pressure. So I got different sizes of dots, showing the cap lids there on screen to show what colors I use, because again, I just kind of grabbed them at random to go with each different little section, and then started adding the dots to it. And this just really stepped it up from being, because everything was fairly flat, you know, because I didn't use anything different. Another way to make it look a little different is you could use the Distress Oxide sprays for the watercolor, because that just naturally makes things different because the pigments kind of do their own thing. And yes, you could totally do the watercoloring with just Distress inks. Smush them on the palette, pick up with the water brush, paint that way. I've done that a million times. It works great. Like I said, I've just been very much into using the sprays lately. There's something about it that I just really enjoy. So to each their own, and it's nice that we've got a ton of options. And also I've said this before, I don't recommend coloring on watercolor paper with alcohol markers. Because when you're trying to like get blends and you're laying down a lot of color, watercolor paper is going to absorb a lot of ink from alcohol markers, and you're going to dry your markers out. That's the only reason I don't recommend it. Can you do it? Yes. But if you do it a lot, you're going to dry out your markers and need to refill them if there's refill available, depending on what type of markers you use. But for things like this, where I'm just adding little dots, it's fine. I don't have a problem with it. So, and for me, it just, I don't know, I enjoyed it. Like, as it all started coming together more, like at first, the first little dots you had, it's like, but now that I'm getting close to the end, it's like, okay, I'm really liking this. I love the texture it gives, you know, and just all that little detail. So I just kept going along, grabbing different markers, adding the little dots to all the different little sections, and then remembered, it was like, ooh, I forgot purple. Need to add that. So yeah, you just vary the pressure. That's it. The harder the pressure, the larger the dot. And then if you barely touch the marker to the cardstock, you just get the finest little teeny tiny little pinpoints. So went along, filled in all those little spots, and then filled in that little flower center that I forgot. And then for my main sentiment, I'm using the CZ Design Happy Birthday Wafer die. And when I opened the package, I had this die cut already in there, like assembled. I was like, perfection. I wish that would happen more often. You know, I just opened the package and was like, oh, I forgot I did this. However, it was only one layer, like one die cut word on the black background. And I was like, no, it needs more. So I die cut 2 more of the happy birthday words just from scraps of white cardstock. And I'm adhering them on top of the other ones. So it gives it that dimension that, as Laura Basson always says, she makes that rule and we all follow it because she's right. Dimension is life. So added that with craft tacky glue. I have this is just a little Gina K precision bottle that I have some craft tacky glue in. And you can do it either way. I could have adhered those 2 pieces together and then stuck them to this one, or I was all over the place. So I just adhered those 2 layers on top of the first one. So it gives them just more bulk, more dimension, I want that happy birthday to really stand out. So after I got those adhered together, I took a bit of a risk and I pulled out the frames die set from Simon. This is old. I've used this in so many videos. This one's almost 10 years old now. Still one of my favorites. And I used just this little frame die and I carefully placed it on the background and I die cut it. And I'll come back to that in a minute. I didn't film stamping the inside. I thought I did, but apparently I didn't turn the camera on. But all I did was stamp the background onto the inside of my card with Simon's flannel positively saturated ink. So just a nice light gray ink. Then I removed the stamp from the MISTI, put my grip mat back in there, put the inside of the card back in there, and pulled out another oldie but goodie set. I've used this one many times. It's the CZ Design Love You Like stamp set. And I put one of the sentiments along with one of the little phrases. This is like, again, old school Kathy Zielski, but still her humor. I love this set because it's like, love you like a good nap, love you like a tax refund, love you like French fries. Love it. The best set. So anyway, stamp that onto the inside with the VersaFine Clair Nocturne ink. Then my card front. The outer frame I adhered with just craft tacky glue. And like when I die cut it, I was very careful. I used just a bit of Post-it tape and I carefully removed the Post-it tape so it didn't tear anything because I wanted to preserve the whole like image. So I adhered the outer portion to the card base with craft tacky glue. And then this inner portion, I applied foam tape, regular foam tape this time, not Simon's Big Mama foam tape. I went with the regulation thickness of foam tape. So this will be popped up a little bit more. Gives it, again, a little bit more dimension. And then that little tiny frame, that's what I usually use on my cards, that I discarded. Technically could have adhered it to the inside of the card, but I didn't line up the stamp the same way on the inside of the card. Because trust me, I tried it. It would have looked really cool to line up the frame with it. But it wasn't working, so I just left it off. So the inner portion on the front is popped up. And then the sentiment I adhered, again, with craft tacky glue right onto that. And then as a final little embellishment, I pulled out these Trinity Stamps Bubble Amore embellishments. So they're little hearts, but they're clear, but they have a bit of like an iridescent shine to them. I have all the Trinity Stamps heart embellishments. Some of my favorites to use. These ones I thought would be cute because they do end up almost looking like bubbles, but they aren't going to fully distract from like the image and the coloring and everything. So I picked those out and then adhered them into place again with just some dabs of craft tacky glue. And with heart embellishments specifically, I take a little extra time to make sure I get them straight because it really bothers me if the hearts are like off kilter. It depends on the design. Sometimes they can be like, oh, they're just sort of popping up all over the place. But for this, it's like, no, they need to be oriented properly. So I got those adhered into place, let the glue dry, and that finished off this card. So like I mentioned, I will have links to everything I used in the description box below the video, including links to all the like spray stain colors, etc. All of that will be in the description box below, along with a link to my blog post where there'll be picture links and the pictures and all the things. So you can check that out below if you're interested. You just need to expand the description box. All the info's there. Thank you all so very much for taking the time to watch my videos, for thumbs upping and commenting and letting the robot overlords know you like what you're seeing. And yeah, subscribe if you haven't. I'd love to have you. And I'll see you all very soon in the next video. Bye.